Jamie Klinger from the Creative Influence Alliance. Welcome back to both of you. We're going to kick off with the front of the FT, and their main story focuses on Trump's latest threat on tariffs, and this is directed at the EU with a whopping 50% he's threatening.
Yeah, and just as the stock markets and analysts and policymakers have breathed a sigh of relief after the Geneva talks with China, Trump has threatened new tariffs of 50% on the EU, which has sent the stock markets tumbling once again. What seems to have happened is that the US and the EU have been having talks about, removing some trade barriers. Trump has said that those talks were going nowhere on Truth Social, where else, and but threatened these tariffs coming in imminently unless the EU can give him something more solid. And the kind of stuff that the US is looking for is fewer trade barriers to its energy exports, and the US is now a net energy exporter, as well as easier access for its businesses and companies. But the EU, it is a big economic player. It is also known for its own protectionism. So we'll wait to see what the EU will do in retaliation for this, because it's not clear that they will just take it lying down.
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you've seen two different approaches. You've seen Keir Starmer going softly, and he has ended up with a trade deal. You've seen China going in all guns blazing, threatening tariffs, retaliatory tariffs, and yet they've also done a deal. So the EU has to decide what stance they take.
Absolutely, and Trump just feels a little bit, he's losing credibility with how much he's flip-flopping on certain things. He loves to sow chaos and reap rewards from it, but too much chaos can just make him look a bit inconsistent, and the EU will be thinking, what can we get out of him, without really taking him at his word.
Well, that's the thing, that there is an unpredictability, isn't there? And some people now are thinking, well, hang on, we've got the threat, let's wait and see whether he sticks with it.
And if he unites the rest of the world, the global community, if he really unites Europe to say, OK, fine, we're not sending things there. He's also talking about, like, with the China one, he went back on phones and then was like, except for smartphones, except for electronics, except for the things that we actually need, except for cars. So it's just the back and forth, and it's the lack of any cohesion of policy that is followed through that leaves the market really all over the place, basically.
But in the meantime, a lot of stress for European companies thinking that our goods, if they go to America, will have a 50% tariff put on them, which could severely affect business. So I'm sure the deadline is the 1st of June, which is really quite close.
Yeah.
So let's see where that goes. Let's move on to the front of the Times, Jamie, because there's a story here about government plans potentially on mental health.
And mental health A&Es, which is really important, because you figure if somebody's in a mental health crisis and they're walking into a normal A&E, they can wait up to 12 hours and they're watching people around them be injured. They're watching people that are in distress rather than going somewhere with mental health specialists. And these new mental health A&Es will have therapy dogs. They'll have smaller portions. They'll have less people there. They'll have quiet rooms for people to have a minute and have water and sober up. And I think it's really interesting in terms of if they're able to roll them out, what it will do to regular A&Es as well, of streamlining the process of getting people that really need help.
This does seem to make a lot of sense, and I imagine be very welcome.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought was, where are they going to get the money from, with anything new that the NHS announces? But it is exactly the point that Jamie makes, that actually you ease up capacity elsewhere, and you're hoping to save money, because actually the people who go to these, there's already one at Ladbroke Grove, a very kind of early pilot version, and the people who go to these can stay 2 or 3 nights, but actually if they'd gone to a normal A&E, they might be staying for 3 weeks or so in a mental health ward. So obviously that's just reducing capacity, reducing overcapacity elsewhere, and so that will save money.
And real specialists there who know how to deal with people in crisis, which
and
may
they
not
send
be
them away
recognised
with a bit of a to-do list next, which charity to contact and that kind of stuff, which is just better to have that attention.
And not exacerbating the already problematic whatever's happening to them, the crisis that they're in, and making it worse.
Potentially escalating things. Take us to the Times next, Jamie, because a story that we've been talking about on this show about Billy Joel being forced to cancel his upcoming tour because of health problems.
Yeah, after he collapsed on stage last month, they've diagnosed him. And I'm from Pennsylvania, so Allentown. I grew up on Billy Joel. Our prom theme songs were all Billy Joel, and Piano Man has been kind of the soundtrack of my childhood. So seeing this and seeing him step back from performing is just really sad. I really wish him well and hope he gets the treatment he needs.
Well, that's right. And I think it's a disorder that is very rare and it affects mobility and balance, as well as
and hearing.
some confusion and hearing as well. So horrible thing for him to be going through. I think it can be reversed, but we'll just have to...
And he'll get the best treatment possible.
Absolutely.
But
good luck to Billy Joel. We wish him well. Take us to the Telegraph next, will you, Cindy? Because this is following up from the announcement this week by the Prime Minister that he'd signed a deal with Mauritius, handing over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands back to Mauritius from the UK. Tories saying it's too expensive, they don't like the deal at all. What are they doing about it?
And the Tories are saying that actually the price tag that the Prime Minister has told us about is not actually real, it's not really accurate representative to what is the true cost. So the Prime Minister says it will be costing us £101 million a year, amounting to £3.4 billion over 99 years. Already quite a high price mark, you might think, for giving back British territory to another country just to retain the military base there. But what the Tories are saying is actually they're demanding the official statistics watchdog to actually probe that number, because they actually think that the true cost might exceed £30 billion in cash terms when you take into account inflation and some additional schemes to fund development projects in Mauritius. Now, my opinion on this, the additional schemes, I think if we're worried about Chinese influence in Mauritius, then actually investment in Mauritius from a British standpoint is a good thing, because that is how you compete for that influence. But the question of, if this is actually going to cost £3 billion over 99 years is still a really valid one. Frankly, the statistics watchdog has no power to make the deal, go back at all. So this is really kind of limited action from the Conservatives, but they're just hoping to keep fueling this controversy to kind of weaken the government.
Yeah, that's right. The government absolutely adamant they had to do this. They said there was international pressure, various legal rulings suggesting that they had to give up sovereignty, but they've maintained the security of their base, which they say is crucial.
But you do have questions over the price tag, I think.
Absolutely.
Do you really have to pay so much, even if it is only £101 million? Only £101 million a year,
Yeah, and definitely that's being scrutinised by the opposition, isn't it? Let's move on to the fallout from another announcement by the government this year, and that was the review into sentencing by David Gauke, who a Tory, but he's carried out this independent review on behalf of the government, who have pretty much taken up all of his recommendations, haven't they? So tell us what the Times angle is on this.
So they're talking about any sentences under 12 months will be vacated. So these people will not be put in unless they had orders out, unless they were out on remand, unless it was repeat offenders. But also, we're not really talking about the victims here and what the victims need for justice, especially if some of the offenders are domestic violence offenders or violence against women, where it's so hard to get a conviction to begin with, and then there's not time served. It also talks about women's sentencing, where there's lots of women that would vacate their sentences, but they don't need that space. The space that they really need is the space in the male prisons.
Well, yes, and David Gauke has looked a lot at, it's not just the issue of prison overcrowding, which is obviously a pressing one for the government at the moment, but also the issue of how you stop reoffending as well. And he feels that some of these policies will go some way to address that, but it does leave the question of where it leaves victims.
Absolutely. So there still needs to be some kind of punishment, and the review actually hasn't really said that much about what would you do instead of sparing prison sentences. But I think there is a good argument to make that anything less than 12 months, actually the offenders have done such minor offences that going to prison and mixing with a more general prison population might actually make reoffending more likely because of the networks, because of perhaps the trauma of going to prison. All of these things, not to say that we should sympathise them, but just from a purely pragmatic level, are we making minor criminals into bigger criminals by putting them in jail? And so I think there's a real debate in the justice community about this, and this is the first step, as you say, to not just address overcapacity, but also reoffending.
Yeah, and as you say, it is a debate, and I'm sure it will go on a fair old time. We're out of time for now. See you both in the next hour. Thanks so much.
A show of military might and menace.